The plasma cannon's warning hum filled Captain Kale Vorthak's ears as the massive Dominion cruiser loomed before his dying ship. Emergency lights bathed the bridge in crimson, and his crew's faces reflected the same dread he felt gnawing at his chest. 3 years of running contraband medical supplies to quarantined colonies. And now the Galactic Trade Consortium had finally cornered them. "Captain," his navigator Rixa called out, her scaled hands dancing over failing controls. "Engines are at 12%. We've got maybe 10 minutes before complete system failure." Kale's jaw tightened. Behind him, in the cargo hold, lay enough synthetic blood plasma and neural regeneration compounds to save thousands of lives on the outer rim world Scalones. The consortium had abandoned to a plague they'd helped create through their mining operations. He wouldn't let bureaucratic greed win. Not today. The comm system crackled to life. "This is Admiral Grenthos of the Dominion Fleet. You will submit to boarding procedures immediately, or we will reduce your vessel to scrap." Kale had heard of Grenthos, the Nexari admiral, known for her ruthless efficiency and complete lack of mercy. Her people were silicon-based life forms, crystalline beings who viewed organic life as chaotic and inferior. The irony wasn't lost on him that she'd be the one to end his humanitarian mission. "Sir," his weapons officer Dash whispered, his young face pale, "we could try ramming them. Take out their engines, maybe buy time for no." Kale's voice cut through the suggestion like a blade. He wouldn't sacrifice his crew for a suicide run. There had to be another way. The view screen shimmered, and suddenly he was looking at Admiral Grenthos herself. She stood 7 feet tall, her body composed of translucent blue crystal that pulsed with inner light. Her face was angular, almost geometric, with eyes like burning sapphires. Beautiful in an alien, terrifying way. "Captain Vorthak," she said, her voice resonating with harmonic overtones, "your reputation precedes you. 3 years of evading our patrols, stealing medical supplies, disrupting lawful trade operations. Quite impressive for an organic." "Those lawful operations are genocide," Kale shot back. "The mining companies poisoned those worlds. The least we can do is treat the victims." Something flickered in her crystalline features' surprise. "Perhaps. You risk your life for strangers. This is illogical. Maybe, but it's right." Grenthos was silent for a long moment, her inner light pulsing in what might have been thought. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted, becoming almost curious. "I have a proposition, Captain. Your ship is disabled, your crew exhausted. Under consortium law, I should arrest you all and confiscate your cargo. However, there exists an alternative." Kale's heart hammered against his ribs. "I'm listening." "Bonding contracts. Ancient Nexari law allows for voluntary servitude to prevent greater bloodshed. You sign a personal service contract with me, 5 years of absolute obedience. I will personally ensure your medical supplies reach their intended destinations. Your crew goes free." The bridge fell silent, except for the ship's dying systems. Kale's mind raced. 5 years as a slave to save thousands of lives. The mathematics were simple, but the reality was terrifying. "And if I refuse, your supplies are destroyed. Your crew imprisoned. The colonies continue to suffer." Kale closed his eyes, seeing the faces of the sick children he'd met on Kepler 7. Remembering the gratitude of the miners on Tau Ceti, who'd been given a second chance at life because of medical supplies he'd smuggled past consortium blockades. When he opened his eyes, Admiral Grenthos was watching him with something that might have been respect. "I accept your terms." The Nexari flagship Crystalline Harmony was a marvel of engineering that made Kale's battered freighter look like a child's toy. Corridors of living crystal pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, responding to the crew's movements and emotions. The air itself seemed to shimmer with microscopic crystalline particles that created an almost dreamlike atmosphere. Admiral Grenthos had been true to her word. Within hours of signing the bonding contract, a document that appeared to be carved from pure light, Kale watched from the observation deck as Consortium medical frigates departed for the Outer Rim colonies. His crew was already aboard a transport, heading for neutral space, their freedom purchased with his own. Regrets, Captain. Granthos's voice carried that same harmonic quality that seemed to resonate in his bones. Cale turned to find her standing behind him, no longer in military dress but wearing flowing robes that seemed to be cut from crystallized starlight. Without her armor, she appeared more elegant, less intimidating, though no less alien. None, he replied honestly. Though I admit, I'm curious about what 5 years of absolute obedience means to a Nexari. Her laugh was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, not what you might expect from your human perspectives. We are not a cruel people, merely structured. Order brings peace, peace brings prosperity. She gestured toward the vast starfield beyond the observation port. Tell me, Cale Vorthok, do you know why I made this offer? The use of his first name surprised him. In 3 years of being hunted by the Consortium, no one in authority had ever addressed him as anything but captain or criminal. Honestly, no. It seems like poor strategy from a military standpoint. Perhaps, but you intrigue me. She moved closer, her crystalline form catching and refracting the starlight in mesmerizing patterns. In 300 years of service to the Consortium, I have never encountered an organic being who would sacrifice everything for strangers. Your actions challenge certain assumptions about your species. Cale studied her face, searching for deception or mockery, but finding neither. What assumptions? That humans are fundamentally selfish, that you value individual survival above collective good, that you are, essentially, inferior to silicon-based life because of your emotional chaos. She paused, her inner light pulsing slowly. You have made me question these beliefs. Over the following days, Cale discovered that his servitude was unlike anything he'd imagined. Rather than menial labor or humiliation, Granthos seemed genuinely interested in understanding human nature. She asked endless questions about his motivations, his fears, his dreams. In return, she began sharing aspects of Nexari culture that were supposedly classified. We do not feel emotions as you do, she explained one evening, as they walked through the ship's crystal gardens, living geometric formations that sang in response to thought patterns. Our responses are more algorithmic. We calculate optimal outcomes and pursue them with unwavering dedication. But you, op. She stopped walking and turned to face him. You chose a suboptimal outcome because it felt right. This concept of rightness, separate from logical benefit, fascinates me. Cale found himself looking forward to these conversations. Granthos was brilliant, certainly, but also surprisingly lonely. As weeks passed, he began to see cracks in her crystalline perfection, moments of doubt, flashes of something that might have been longing. Do you ever wonder what it would be like? He asked one night, as they stood in her private quarters, a space that resembled the inside of a to feel things the way humans do. Her light pulsed erratically for a moment before stabilizing. I have begun to wonder about many things since you arrived aboard this ship, such as... She was quiet for so long that Cale thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. Such as why your presence creates harmonic resonances in my crystal matrix that have no logical explanation. Such as why I find myself calculating ways to extend our conversations rather than ending them efficiently. Such as why I have countermanded 3 direct orders from Consortium Command to avoid separating us. Cale's breath caught. Granthos, I believe, she said, her sapphire eyes meeting his, that I am beginning to understand what you humans call caring for someone, and it terrifies me. The crisis began when Commodore Vex arrived, without warning. His battlecruiser dropping out of hyperspace, with the cold precision that marked all Nexari military operations. Cale was in the hydroponics bay, one of the few areas on the ship where he felt truly at peace among growing things. When the alert Klaxons began their crystalline wail, Grenthos appeared moments later. Her usual composed demeanor fractured with what Kale had learned to recognize as distress. Her inner light flickered rapidly, casting dancing shadows across the walls. "What's wrong?" he asked, setting down the alien flowering vine he'd been tending. "Commodore Vex. He's here to conduct what you might call an inspection, though the Nexari term translates more accurately as corrective realignment." Her voice carried harmonics of fear. "Someone has reported my ... unusual behavior regarding your contract." Kale felt ice settle in his stomach. Over the past 3 months, their relationship had evolved far beyond the original terms. What had begun as intellectual curiosity had deepened into something neither of them fully understood. Conversations that lasted through ship's night cycles. Shared meals where Grenthos watched in fascination as he ate her people sustained themselves through direct energy absorption. Moments of comfortable silence that spoke louder than words. "What does that mean for us? For you? Likely transfer to a labor camp. For me, ... double quotes. Her crystalline form dimmed. Nexari, who develop emotional attachments, are considered compromised. The treatment involves harmonic restructuring as they would remove my capacity to feel anything beyond algorithmic responses." The thought of Grenthos being turned into an emotionless automaton made Kale's chest tighten with protective fury. "There has to be something we can do. Nothing that doesn't violate every oath I've taken." She moved closer, her hand almost touching his before she caught herself. "Unless ... unless, what?" "The bonding contract contains clauses I haven't activated. Emergency provisions that would make you not just my servant, but my ... partner. It would grant you protection under Nexari law, but it would also make our bond permanent and irrevocable." Kale stared at her, understanding the magnitude of what she was suggesting. "You're talking about marriage? Nexari marriage? The closest human equivalent? Yes. But Kale, you must understand, such bonds are not entered lightly. They create actual quantum entanglement between individuals. You would share my thoughts, my emotions, my very existence. And I would share yours." Before he could respond, the hydroponics bay doors dissolved, and Commodore Vex strode in. Where Grenthos was blue crystal with graceful lines, Vex was angular, black obsidian, his form radiating cold authority. His eyes were like dark stars, and when he spoke, his voice cut through the air like breaking glass. "Admiral Grenthos, how ... convenient to find you here with your pet organic." His gaze swept over Kale with obvious disgust. "I trust you've been maintaining proper protocols." "Of course, Commodore." Grenthos's voice had returned to its formal, military cadence, but Kale could see the rapid pulse of light beneath her crystalline skin. "Captain Vorthok has been adequate in his service." "Adequate." Vex circled them slowly, his footsteps creating small spiderweb cracks in the deck plating. "Yet reports suggest you've been spending an unusual amount of time with this specimen. Meals together, extended conversations, even allowing him access to restricted areas of the ship. I have been conducting sociological research on human behavior, patterns. Such data could prove valuable for future consortium operations." Vex's laugh was like shattering ice. "Research? How thoroughly you've compromised yourself, Admiral. Do you think I cannot see the harmonic resonance between you? The quantum fluctuations that indicate emotional contamination?" Kale saw light dim with shame and felt something fierce and protective rise in his chest. "She's done nothing wrong." Silence. Organic. Vex's form flared with dark energy. "You will not speak unless addressed directly. You are property, nothing more." "Actually," Kale said, stepping forward, despite the danger, "I think you'll find my status is somewhat more complicated than that." He reached out and took Grenthos's hand, feeling the warm energy that flowed beneath her crystalline surface. Her eyes widened in shock, as he spoke the words she'd taught him during their conversations about Nexari law. I invoke the right of synthesis. I claim partnership bond with Admiral Granthos under the ancient laws that predate consortium authority. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Light exploded from their joined hands, racing up their arms and creating a visible connection of pure energy between them. Kale felt his consciousness expand, suddenly aware of Granthos's thoughts and emotions as if they were his own. Wonder, terror, love, and desperate hope crashed through him in waves. Through their bond, he felt her making the same choice, accepting the partnership with every fiber of her being. Commodore Vex staggered backward, his dark form flickering with rage. Impossible. No Nexari would bond with an organic. Apparently, Granthos said, her voice now carrying harmonic overtones that matched Kale's heartbeat. You were wrong. The quantum entanglement hit Kale like a wave of liquid starfire, flooding his consciousness with sensations he'd never imagined possible. Through the bond, he felt Granthos's crystalline matrix resonating with his neural patterns, creating harmonics that seemed to rewrite reality around them. For a moment that lasted eternity, they were one being existing in two forms, sharing every thought, every memory, every emotion. When the initial surge subsided, Kale found himself seeing the world through new eyes. Colors were more vivid, sounds carried emotional weight, and he could sense the quantum currents that flowed through the ship's living crystal structure. But more than that, he could feel Granthos's presence in his mind, not intrusive, but comforting, like a warm light in the darkness. Commodore Vex's obsidian form had gone completely black, his inner energy withdrawn in what Kale now recognized as a defensive posture. Through his bond with Granthos, he understood that Vex was genuinely afraid. This is an abomination, Vex snarled, but his voice lacked its earlier authority. Nexari do not bond with inferior species. The Council will never recognize this, perversion. The law is clear, Granthos replied, and Kale felt her drawing strength from their connection. Partnership bonds supersede all other contracts and cannot be dissolved by outside authority. Captain Vorthok is now my equal under Nexari law, with all rights and protections that entails. Your equal. Vex's laugh was bitter as broken crystal. He's an organic, a chaos being driven by primitive emotions and irrational impulses. Kale felt anger flared through the bond, not his own, but Granthos is burning bright and pure as a star's core. The intensity of it surprised him. He'd never imagined she was capable of such fierce emotion. You speak of chaos and irrationality, she said, her form blazing with inner light. Yet this organic being sacrificed his freedom to save strangers. He chose compassion over logic, selflessness over survival. Perhaps it is we who are inferior, Commodore, in our cold calculations and algorithmic responses. Vex took a step backward, his form beginning to crack under the pressure of Granthos' radiance. You are compromised beyond redemption. When the Council learns of this, the Council will learn that Admiral Granthos has achieved something unprecedented in Nexari history. Kale interrupted, drawing on knowledge that flowed through their bond. She has evolved beyond the limitations of purely logical existence. She has transcended. The word carried weight in Nexari culture that Kale hadn't understood before. Transcendence was their highest aspiration, the theoretical next step in their evolution that their greatest philosophers had debated for millennia. Through Granthos's memories, he saw centuries of failed attempts to achieve it through technology, through meditation, through pure force of will. Transcendence, through contamination with organic chaos. Vex's voice was skeptical, but Kale caught an undertone of uncertainty. Watch, Kale said simply. He reached out through the bond, sharing with Granthos the memory of his first visit to the plague colonies, the suffering he'd witnessed, the desperate gratitude in the eyes of children who'd been given hope through his medical supplies. But he didn't just share the visual memory. He shared the emotions, the overwhelming compassion that had driven him to risk everything for strangers. Thos crystalline form began to change, new colors swirling through her matrix as she experienced human empathy for the first time. Her light shifted from pure blue to a spectrum that encompassed the full range of emotional experience: joy, sorrow, love, determination, all blending into something beautiful and utterly unique. "Do you see?" she whispered, her voice carrying harmonic frequencies that seemed to touch the very fabric of space. "This is what we've been missing. Logic alone cannot create true understanding. Calculation cannot generate genuine compassion. We have been incomplete." Commodore Vex stared at her transformation in stunned silence. Through the bond, Kale felt Grenthos reaching out with her expanded consciousness, touching Vex's mind with gentle persistence. "Feel it," she urged him. "Feel what I feel. See what I see." For just a moment, Vex's obsidian shell flickered, revealing confused vulnerability beneath. In that instant, Kale glimpsed the truth beneath their cold exterior. The Nexari were desperately lonely, cut off from the very connections that gave existence meaning. But the moment passed, and Vex's defenses slammed back into place. "No," he said, his voice hollow with fear. "This is madness. You've been infected with organic weakness." He activated his personal communicator, speaking in rapid Nexari military code. Through their bond, Grenthos translated for Kale. Reinforcements were coming, along with specialists equipped to forcibly sever their partnership bond. "They're afraid," Kale realized aloud. "If other Nexaris see what you've become, it threatens their entire social structure. Then we must ensure they have the opportunity to choose," Grenthos replied, her new multicolored radiance pulsing with determination. "But first, we need to survive the next few hours." She turned to Commodore Vex, her transformed voice carrying authority that seemed born from something greater than rank or protocol. "You have a choice, Commodore. You can help us prove that Nexori evolution doesn't have to mean abandoning logic. It means expanding it to include the wisdom of the heart. Or you can remain trapped in the prison of pure calculation, forever wondering what you might have become." Vex's form flickered with internal conflict, black obsidian warring with hints of other colors trying to break through. The next few minutes would determine not just their fate, but potentially the future of an entire species. The Nexari strike team materialized through quantum translocation, with the silence of falling shadows, their forms crackling with disruptor energy, designed to shatter molecular bonds. Kale counted 12 soldiers, their crystalline bodies radiating menace as they surrounded him and Grenthos in the hydroponics bay. Leading them was Architect Zephyr, a being so ancient and powerful that his crystalline form seemed to bend light around itself. Unlike the blue-tinted clarity of Grenthos, or the obsidian darkness of Vex, Zephyr appeared to be carved from pure diamond, his faceted surface reflecting infinity. "Admiral Grenthos." Zephyr's voice resonated with the weight of millennia. "You will submit to harmonic cleansing immediately. The contamination has progressed beyond acceptable parameters." Through their bond, Kale felt Grenthos's terror not for herself, but for what they represented. If the partnership was severed, it wouldn't just end their connection. It would prove to the Nexari leadership that emotional evolution was impossible, dooming their entire species to eternal isolation. "Architect Grenthos," said her transformed voice, carrying new harmonic frequencies that seemed to make the very air shimmer. "I request the right to demonstrate the validity of our bond before the High Council." "There is no validity to demonstrate," Zephyr replied coldly. "You have allowed organic chaos to corrupt your matrix. You are no longer Nexari." "Then what am I?" Grenthos asked, and Kale felt her drawing strength from their connection, using his human courage to face down the most powerful being in Nexari space. "You are an abomination." The word struck like a physical blow, but instead of weakening them, it seemed to crystallize their resolve. Through the bond, Kale felt Grenthos's response forming not words, but pure demonstration. She reached out, through their quantum entanglement, sharing with him the complete scope of Nexari civilization, billions of beings existing in perfect, logical harmony, their technology unmatched, their society structured with mathematical precision, beautiful, ordered, and utterly empty of joy. Then she showed him her own memories, 300 years of dutiful service, calculating optimal outcomes, following algorithmic responses to every situation, a perfect existence that felt like death. Finally, she shared what had changed, the moment she'd first felt genuine curiosity about his actions, the growing warmth of their conversations, the explosive revelation of caring for another being, beyond logical justification. For the first time in her existence, she had felt truly alive. But instead of keeping this revelation private, she broadcast it through the ship's crystalline network, allowing every Nexari aboard to experience what she had discovered. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Throughout the strike team, rigid formations began to waver as individual soldiers experienced human emotion for the first time. Some recoiled in terror, their forms flickering with instability. Others stood transfixed, their inner light pulsing, with new colors as wonder and curiosity awakened within them. Even Commodore Vex, who had been standing rigid with military discipline, began to show cracks in his obsidian shell. Through one of those fractures, Kale glimpsed something he'd never expected to see in a Nexari longing. "Stop this," Architect Zephyr commanded, his diamond form blazing with power. "You are infecting them with chaos." "No," Kale said, stepping forward despite the lethal energy crackling around the architect. "She's showing them what they could become, what they were meant to become." He opened his own mind through the bond, sharing his memories of humanity at its best, parents sacrificing for children, strangers helping strangers, individuals choosing compassion over personal gain. Not chaos, but a different kind of order. Not the rigid perfection of mathematics, but the complex beauty of symphonies and poetry and love. One of the strike team soldiers suddenly stepped out of formation, her previously clear crystalline form now swirling with rainbow colors. I can feel it," she whispered in wonder. "The connections between all things, the meaning beyond function." Others began to follow, their weapons lowering as they experienced the awakening of emotional consciousness. Through the ship's network, Kale could sense the transformation spreading, touching minds that had been locked in logical isolation for centuries. But Architect Zephyr was too powerful, too ancient to be affected by their demonstration. His diamond form began to expand, energy building around him like a miniature star. "If you will not submit to cleansing," he declared, "then you will be completely destroyed. Better to lose one ship than allow this contamination to spread throughout Nexari space." Kale felt Grenthos's despair through their bond. They had come so far, shown so much, only to face obliteration at the moment of triumph. But alongside her despair, he felt something else, his own stubborn human refusal to give up. "You're wrong about one thing, Architect," he said, moving to stand beside Grenthos, their hands joining as energy began to build around them. "We're not contaminating your people. We're completing them." The quantum bond between them flared to life, but this time it didn't stop with their individual connection. Through the ship's crystalline network, through the awakened consciousness of the strike team, through the growing awareness spreading across the fleet, their partnership became a catalyst for something unprecedented in galactic history. Not human, not Nexari, but something new, something that could bridge the gap between chaos and order, between emotion and logic, between the lonely perfection of one species and the messy, beautiful humanity of another. As Architect Zephyr's attack reached critical intensity, Kale and Grenthos faced annihilation, knowing they had already won. The transformation had begun, and not even the most powerful being in Nexari space could stop an entire species from evolving beyond the limitations that had defined them for millennia. The explosion of energy that followed would be felt across half the galaxy. The wave of transcendence that erupted from the crystalline harmony rippled through hyperspace at velocities that defied conventional physics, carrying with it the quantum signature of evolutionary change. Across Nexari's space, millions of crystalline beings suddenly experienced their first taste of emotional consciousness, their rigid social structures cracking like ice in spring. But in the eye of that storm, Kale and Grinthos found themselves somewhere else entirely. They stood on a beach of crystalline sand beneath twin suns, waves of liquid light lapping at shores that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The air sparkled with possibility, and in the distance, structures of impossible beauty rose from the landscape, part grown, part built, organic curves flowing seamlessly into geometric precision. "Where are we?" Kale asked, though through their bond, he already sensed the answer. "The Nexus," Grinthos replied, her form now completely transformed. She remained recognizably herself, but her crystalline matrix had evolved beyond simple blue clarity to encompass the full spectrum of existence and feeling, logic, and intuition, all balanced in perfect harmony. The theoretical space where perfect order meets perfect chaos. We've created it. Around them, other figures began to materialize. Nexari, whose rigid forms now flowed with organic grace, their inner light pulsing with emotional depth. Humans, whose chaotic nature had found new structure, their consciousness expanded beyond individual limitations. And something else, beings that were neither human nor Nexari, but somehow both, and more. Commodore Vex appeared among them, his obsidian shell cracked open to reveal a core of warm ember light. "I understand now," he said, his voice carrying wonder instead of its former coldness. "We were never complete, either of our species. We needed each other." Even some members of the strike team had made the transition, their consciousness elevated beyond the need for violence or rigid hierarchy. They moved with fluid grace, their crystalline forms dancing with patterns of light that seemed to tell stories without words. But it was the appearance of Architect Zephin that truly marked the magnitude of change. The ancient being's diamond form had shattered completely, revealing something indescribable at his core, not light or energy, but pure possibility itself. "I have existed for 10,000 years, he said, his voice now carrying harmonics of humility alongside its cosmic authority. "Believing that perfection lay in the elimination of variables, I was wrong. True perfection lies in the synthesis of all possibilities." Through their bond, Kale felt Grinthos's amazement. The architect had not been destroyed by their transformation. He had been the first to truly understand it, his ancient wisdom finally able to grasp what younger minds had achieved through instinct and love. "But what about the others?" Kale asked. "The Nexari, who couldn't or wouldn't change?" "The humans who remain unchanged. They continue as they were," Zephin replied, his form now shifting through configurations that hurt to look at directly. "Evolution is not mandatory, but the option now exists for any who choose it." As if summoned by his words, the space around them filled with new arrivals, humans from across the galaxy who had felt the change and chosen to embrace it. Next, scholars who had dreamed of transcendence finally achieving it, other species entirely silicon-based Viridians, energy beings from the galactic core. Even Mechanical A is who had somehow found a way to participate in organic evolution. All of them transformed, all of them finding new ways to exist that transcended the limitations of their origins. "The contract," Grinthos said suddenly, her thoughts touching Kale's through their permanent bond. "Do you realize what we've done?" He smiled, understanding flooding through him. "We broke it. Not the legal terms, the fundamental assumption it was based on. The idea that beings could be owned, that some were superior to others, that evolution was impossible. More than that, her transformed voice carried joy so pure it seemed to ring like bells across dimensions. We've written a new contract, not between master and servant, but between existence itself and the possibility of becoming more than we ever imagined. Around them, the nexus continued to expand as more beings chose transcendence. Entire civilizations were discovering that the barriers between species, between organic and synthetic, between order and chaos, were illusions that could be overcome through connection and understanding. Kale reached out to touch Grenthos's hand. Their quantum bond now, just one note in a symphony of consciousness that spanned galaxies. What had begun as a desperate bargain to save lives had become something infinitely greater, the next step in the evolution of intelligence itself. No regrets? She asked, echoing her question from their first day together. None, he replied, meaning it completely. Though I have to ask, what do we do now? Her laughter was music that made stars dance in their orbits. Now we explore what it means to be truly alive, together. In the distance, new worlds were already taking shape, crafted by consciousnesses that understood both the necessity of structure and the beauty of spontaneity. Civilizations were being born that combined the best of all species, all possibilities, all dreams. The contract that had brought them together was finished, its terms fulfilled beyond any legal framework, but the bond they had forged, the love that had transcended species, law, in the very nature of existence itself, that was eternal. As they walked hand in hand across the crystalline beach, leaving footprints that became flowers of living light, Kale Vorthok and Admiral Grenthos began the greatest adventure of all, discovering what lay beyond the boundaries of everything they had once believed possible. Behind them, the universe itself was learning to dream. The end.